Welcome to Downshift. My name is Matt, and this is the sleeker version of Audi's most important model. This is, of course, their Q5 in Sportback form, and it's packed with a lot of cool and interesting features. So today, we're going to take a tour of all of them, thanks to our friends at Audi Milwaukee. Let's dive in. And we're going to start outside with some styling stuff. Now, I have to talk about this paint because it's awesome. This is what Audi is calling their Ultra Blue. And it is just a really, really intense blue. It's a nice royal. Usually we're used to seeing Audis that are super sedate, black, gray, white, silver, but this one is certainly going to go to somebody with a little sense of personality. And you can see all the silver accents on the outside. This car has the S-Line package, which we'll talk about in a minute, but it does not have the black optics package. So all of the trim details you're seeing are silver rather than black. And to be honest, I think that does complement the Ultra Blue a lot better than the black would. But more specifically, you've got silver treatments for your grille surround. You've got these little inlaid, almost like fingernail type things for your grille, your mesh grille. Silver Audi rings, Quattro badge. You've got silver, this is more of like a brushed effect to your front splitter, kind of cool. And then you've got a very chromish front fascia detail. And then around the side, you've got silver wheels, but you've also got a silver rocker panel, as well as window surrounds that go all the way around, not just the top or just the bottom. And then around back, you've got this very determinate chrome bar that goes all the way across under your four rings, and a silver detail for your lower diffuser. But speaking of the diffuser, do you notice something maybe missing? Would it be the exhaust? Yeah, so Audi has been scolded in past years for their fake exhaust ports. So what do? But you just get rid of them. You just get rid of the problem and then tuck them up underneath. And the last thing about the rear bumper, I promise. And then you see that tow hitch right there. Now this Q5 or Q5s are rated to up to 4,400 pounds of towing. Now that's actually a lot. You think about like a non-luxury, I guess you could call competitor just due to size and segment, maybe something like the Honda CR-V. And that thing maxes out its towing at about 1,500 pounds. So 4,400 is way more than that. And then we take a look at the profile for our next point because we have to talk about this being the Q5 Sportback. Now, what does the Sportback mean? Well, in Audi speak, it means tapered roofline or curved roofline or coupe roofline. And it doesn't really hamper practicality too much. I know that's everyone's thing, and we'll talk more about it when we talk about the rear seats and the trunk, but I think it looks fairly cool. And to me, honestly, from the profile here, it looks very Porsche Cayenne coupe. And speaking of Sportback and sporty type things, this is equipped with the S-Line package. It's the sporty appearance package for the Q5, or really any Audi. It's supposed to look more SQ5 than it does Q5, and I think, again, it fits well with the theme. You've got an S-Line badge on your front fender here, which is very Mercedes-AMG. And then, of course, your front grille and lower fascias are more aggressive. In the non-S-Line versions, you'd have kind of like a vertical and horizontal slatting to your grille, but this is definitely a much more interesting pattern. That diffuser we love to talk about is more embellished. And you get S kick plates on the sides of your doors, not the top, but the sides, to protect it from when you drag and hit your foot. And just because it's the S-Line doesn't mean it gets more power. You still have pretty good power here though. It's a 2-liter turbocharged engine, 4 cylinders of course, but with a mild hybrid system, which means power is outputted here at about 261 horsepower and 273 pound-feet of torque. And that's pretty good, and even something of this size and this shape, small SUV, it's still getting about 25 mpg combined and approaching 30 on the highway. And of course our favorite party piece is the interior paneling, matte or gloss finish, and of course we have matte here. And Audi exterior designs are never that crazy, but what are their headlight designs. Now this one's fairly clean. You've got a couple individual LED checks in there, and then you've got a small little Audi detail with some, I don't know what these are, small lines, but it's pretty cool. And you can option Audi's digital matrix LED headlights, so it'll project stuff on the ground in front of you. And the rear taillights don't have any Audi logos in them. Another classic Audi thing is massive grills, but unlike BMW, these are very handsome massive grills. Now this one is a little bit different design than you would get on a normal Q5, and that's because this has the S-Line package, which we talked about a little bit earlier, and it's surrounded in silver because it's not got the black optics package, and I think it looks pretty good. But look at this. What is this small detail? It's almost like, I don't know, some sort of like lever. I just kind of like want to open it. But it looks cool either way. And this was something I was surprised to see, a rear windshield wiper. You're predominantly seeing more of these slope-backed SUVs minus a rear windshield wiper, something like the Lexus RZ or even the Toyota BZ4X. They're like, oh, well, the airflow over the top will clear the water, but it's nice to have a mechanical failsafe because that's not always the case. And then we'll go into the trunk. It's easy powered release, of course. It's classic Audi opening where the entire rear panel opens up. And then you've got all of this extraness. And you do have lights back here as mandated by the government, because even when the trunk is up, you need to have lighting. So they have it. This used to be, like I think I mentioned, the biggest between the three Germans. But now the X3 and the GLC are newer and a little bit bigger. However, I don't want it to seem like this isn't a big trunk. It still absolutely is totally, totally practical. Again, I use this as kind of a benchmark. And if this is pretty much at the edge of the end of the trunk, it's still a pretty decent size. So we even have another 4 to 5 inches in addition to that. Plus it's nice and deep, seats fold 40, 20, 40, and again, increasingly rare, you can fold the rear seats from back here. You've also got grocery bag hangers, you've got this thing, whatever this does. I love this for this reason exactly. And then of course, some additional storage under the floor. And I know everyone's concern with the Sportback shape is the fact that you're gonna lose all this cargo practicality, and it's kind of true and it's kind of not, because really the only place that you're missing practicality is from like here up. So unless you're packing your trunk all the way to the roof, you're not really missing out on any practicality in here. And also, it's nice to have some lighting in your trunk back here. I don't see this really many other places. But then moving up to the rear seats, they're pretty nice. This is the beige interior, but you have this nice kind of contrasted piping. It's got a little bit of gray in there. I hope that's coming through on camera. And then you've got very color match stitching here, but also contrasted stitching and additional piping up here. Just kind of nice little details. Again, they're pretty decent size. It's really headroom that starts to be a thing for me at about 6'1", but I'll hop in here. Now, you can see, I do fit. I've got these convenient cutouts for my knee here. I don't want to sit back here all the way across the country, but it's still definitely comfortable to sit back here. Got a nice panel roof we'll talk more about, but you've got good features back here. Vents, of course, need it. Climate zone, need it. Chargers back here. You don't have heated seats, at least not on this one, in the back. But what you do have is a reclining feature for your rear seats. And we just touched on it, but again, wouldn't be a Downshift video without talking about the pano roof. And it even opens. This front portion opens and slides back. It's not something that you get every day, especially not with the newer EVs, so it's nice to see in here. And we talked about the rear seats, so we should talk about the front seats. Again, very similar detailing, piping, stitching, same color stitching. You've got power, lumbar controls, great. You do have heated seats, which is right there. You do not have cooled seats, at least not on this one. But yeah, they're nice. They're comfy, well bolstered, definitely a nice place to spend time and eat up highway miles. And another thing that's becoming an increasingly weird kink on this channel is automatic windows, up, down, all 4. Love to see it. And then I thought this was kind of interesting. You've got a bunch of storage cubbies to varying degrees of helpfulness. First is your center console, of course, normal, USB-C. Weirdly, it's labeled number 2, and there's not another one in there, so I don't know what number 2 is about. But anyway, you have one there, and then you have this one here, which is clearly intended for a phone, and this is an iPhone 11, and it just barely doesn't fit. I mean, it does. It would fit here, but it's just not quite big enough. So if you've had a Pro or one of the bigger phones, then you're gonna have a hard time here. But then you have this nice cubby up here, which is nice for wallets, keys, etc. And then this one, which is a little bit different and weird. It's got small and, I don't know, not super useful. But then, you know, we had number 2 in the center console. We've got charger number 1 here, but number 1 is USB-A and number 2 is USB-C. This is the march of technology evolution. And of course, a 12 volt, which is also in the back seat, and like, why? And then of course we have to talk about technology, and specifically the infotainment screen. It's very tablet oriented. It kind of reminds me a lot of when the A7 first came out and you pressed a button and then it would feed itself up. And it looks very much like that, but of course with the new technology stuff. And it's pretty good. It's very classic Audi software, which means it's easy to navigate. It's not packed with a bunch of extra frills or fluff or things you don't need to confuse you. You do have wireless Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, great, you love to see it. You do have pretty good, decent 360 cameras with a bunch of different views, including some we'll talk about later, but it's pretty nice. And as I'm clicking around here, you can tell that got a little bit of haptic feedback and some response, so you kind of know what you're doing. And then we have this button, which is screen off. And I hear people talk about this on YouTube a lot, actually. And I just have to wonder, and I'm asking you genuinely in the comments, tell me, do you push this? Are you so distracted by your infotainment system that you go and turn it off? Because in my experience, people are always asking for bigger and more screens. I mean, you see it as a trend in the industry, so it's interesting that they have this button to turn the screen off. And of course, an Audi video wouldn't be complete without talk of the virtual cluster. Now, Audi was one of the first people to do the digital info, or the digital center cluster thing. They called it their virtual cluster, and they're still some of the best to do it. You've got a load of different views. You can do full screen map, which is just awesome. And you can change the view like this if you want more or less map or whatever. And it's just really, really cool. The graphics are great, and it works really, really well. And you see on the passenger side of the dash, you have a Quattro badge, which is interesting to have on the interior because you have one in the front grille. So do you need this one here on your passenger side of the dash? And then speaking of Quattro, we're going to go down here because obviously it has all-wheel drive, but it's got an off-road mode, which is interesting. It turns off stability control, and if you were to have a Q5 with the air suspension, the car would raise itself up to give you more ground clearance. And also, you know how I said we would talk more about the cameras? Well, this is a view of your tolerances on either side of your wheels. And this is something that you see in a lot of off-road trucks and SUVs and stuff like that. So you can see exactly where your lines are if you're going to run into trees or ruts or wherever the trail is. So this has some genuine and proper off-road stuff, including hill descent as well. And just another classic Audi quirk. Most cars have blind spot monitoring somehow embedded into the side view mirror right about here. But Audi does it as a big orange or amber light on the inside of the wing mirror housing itself. So if someone's in your blind spot, this whole thing right here will light up. A little bit interesting. Also, very nice RS7 back there. And as usual, the last thing we'll talk about is price. Now, a Q5 starts at about $44,000. It's a little bit more for the more sleek sportback design, but even still, that's several $1,000s less than the next cheapest of the three, which is the BMW X3, and then the new GLC even goes up from there. And as tested, this thing is about $60,000, but as you've seen, there's a lot of car here. So let's get into our final thoughts before we do our full review next week. So those are the 25 most interesting things about the Audi Q5 Sportback, and we didn't even touch on some of the best things like the transmission and the overall driving experience. So make sure you stay tuned next week as we're doing our full pros and cons review. We'll see you then.